The Janna rework is here. In patch 13.22, she got her stats and abilities adjusted to fit the playstyle of a more aggressive harasser around her W and auto attacks. They changed a lot of things, but I'll give you a quick summary on important things you need to know. Janna's auto range is longer, and her old passive was replaced with this new version where her basic attacks and W deal bonus magic damage equal to a percent based on her level of her bonus movement speed. Now you want to make sure you are autoing as much as possible to fully utilize this. A cool little interaction with this change is that her autos can apply healing reduction now. Her Q has an indicator for the max range, and the mana cost in CD is a lot longer. You can really feel both the mana and CD changes early in game, so you need to be a lot more mindful of your mana. Her W was changed from a flat 12-second cooldown to a scaling cooldown with lower mana costs, lower base damage, but they added the Tailwind bonus damage. It also has a lower slow duration, and Zephyr passive move speed is no longer removed while on cooldown. Her E cooldown and shield amount was increased, but her mana and shield duration was decreased. The shield duration is longer, but the shield no longer decays and no longer gains heal and shield power on CC. They added a new passive where her E remaining cooldown is reduced by 20% on slow knockups, max once per spell. It's really important now to open fights with shield. This one took me a while to get used to because for the old Janna you would want to CC someone first and then E, but now it's the opposite. That covers all the Janna changes. As for her best build, I've tested a lot of runes and items already, and generally there are 3 main keystones with 2 item paths that people go. Janna either goes Comet, Aery, and Glacial. I'll give you my thoughts on each, starting with Comet. It's a pretty common page a lot of Janna players have been running. I think the best rune in the sorcery page is Celerity, as the increased movement speed works really well with the passive damage, and you automatically get an increase from the movement speed from your W. Generally, players pair Domination Secondary with Relentless Hunter. This synergizes really well with Celerity, and the movement speed will give you more damage on your passive. Most people go Taste of Blood to pair with it, but I think Zombie Ward or Cheap Shot is also fine. To close out this page, I went with attack speed runes to really utilize that damage from movement speed to autos. This game, I was testing out other secondary runes, but I still feel like I got the main idea for Comet. I always go 3 points W and Emax with this build. Comet felt really strong, trading was nice, and I had a lot of kill pressure in lane. I did really well, and this game went for about 30 minutes, and I had about 1,000 damage on Comet, which felt pretty underwhelming. I know this number is pretty low, and I definitely could have gone a lot more, but even then, I feel like a keystone dedicated for damage for Janna is not worth it. Damage as an enchanter is only good at the early stages of the game, and it felt like the damage mid/late was so small I didn't even have a keystone. Compared to Aery, Comet will always do more damage, but I'm not convinced that the extra damage you get from Comet is worth giving up the shield from Aery. I also think that the rework made Janna's early game skirmishing better, but it's still not great. You have to win lane with Comet because you don't scale well, and the rework Janna is not strong enough to win you majority of your lanes. I feel the same way about the attack speed runes, good early but is really bad late. Overall, I think Comet is the worst option out of the 3 keystones. Moving on to Aery now, the rune page is generally the same as Comet. I know people take Gathering Storm on it over Scorch, and people will usually go Domination second with the same loadout, but I've also seen people take Resolve second with Revitalize and Font of Life. I think Resolve secondary is Janna's best minor runes, but Domination feels a lot better just because of the movement speed. Revitalize gives keystone level value in most games, and Font works really well with Janna's kit. As I was testing Aery, this keystone felt like it made the most sense with how this new version of Janna should be played. Aery amplifies your damage and gives shields, making skirmishing better overall, and even if you don't win lane, you get to scale a lot harder than Comet. Initially, I felt like this was Janna's best keystone, but after playing a handful of it, I didn't like the value I was seeing for my runes. This 23-minute game, I popped off and got about 800 extra damage and 800 damage shielded. This game was also 23 minutes, and I got about 600 damage and 1100 damage shielded. While these numbers are pretty good, if we compare them to Glacial, which I'll go over very soon, you'll see why I think Glacial is better. I know this version of Janna is centered around playing aggressively, but I felt like even when I was trading well, I went even in a lot of matchups. Even after these changes, Janna still doesn't win any new matchups, so I prefer a build that scales the hardest, which is Glacial. Moving on to Glacial now, my rune setup is a bit different from the pre-Janna changes. I take Stopwatch over Magical Footwear because I feel like having tier 1 boots is super important because your autos and W scale for movement speed. I also take Biscuits since her Q takes up a lot of mana. As for secondaries, I still go Font and Revitalize. These 2 runes are absolutely insane with Glacial since Font will constantly re-trigger off of Glacial Rays, which Revitalize increases the heal for. For the Glacial playstyle, it's less about taking aggressive trades and more about trading just for spell thief stacks. Your goal isn't to poke the enemy out, it's to neutralize the lane and to just scale. You have more utility to set up ganks because you can guarantee the Glacial slow with Tornado. I think you end up having similar kill pressure as Aery or Comet because of this. I don't go 3 points to W with this build and just go Emax. As much as I want to utilize the playstyle change, I think that the scaling Glacial build is still just a superior way of playing Janna. Glacial is one of the best keystones in the game, and Janna is able to utilize it to its max. Not only can she reliably use it off cooldown, but it also scales with the items that she builds as Glacial slow scales with increased heal and shield power. This was the value of my stats for that specific game. In 27 minutes, Glacial had 73 seconds of enemy champion slowed with 1200 damage reduced, with 1800 bonus healing and 1200 bonus shielding from Revitalize and 1200 total ally healing from font. It's like I'm getting Aery level value just from the minor runes. Here are two very comparable 23-minute games. The left is Glacial value while the right is Aery. I had a very similar score in both games and you can see the difference in value. I think it's not fair to completely compare the numbers just because Relentless Hunter and Celerity are hard to measure and compare, but I feel like you can do so with Aery and Resolve. Now for the itemization, if you're going for the Comet setup, I think you should always open with boots and a Dark Seal. Dark Seal got buffed not too long ago and it's a great cheap item that will help you win early. Generally there are two core builds for Comet, first one being Mandate and Shurelya's. It's important if you do go this build, make sure to get Mandate first as damage is better early. The second build is Shurelya's and Ardent/Staff. For the most part on Janna, Shurelya's will always be paired with these two as the movement speed enables your allies to really utilize the buffs on these items. Those two are just the core, you can flex any of these items for whatever situation you are in. I think it's fine to get Oblivion Orb early or Medjay's. If you do go Oblivion Orb, you can just sit on the item and not upgrade it because the healing reduction is the same on tier 1 as it is complete. Make sure to run Flash Ignite for maximum kill pressure. Next for Aery, there are two main builds for this path and your opener will change depending on what you go. If you go the Shurelya's build, I think you should open the same as Comet with Dark Seal and boots, same flexible items as the Comet page. If you go the Moonstone build, I think you should rush tier 1 boots and get Redemption as fast as you can. If you haven't tried it already, I would highly recommend Redemption Rush because of the amount of plays and value you get is unmatched to any item. Moonstone itself feels pretty weak, but once you pair it with Redemption, it becomes very strong. For the flexible pool, I think any of these items are fine. It's not worth getting Oblivion Orb early if you do go the Moonstone Redemption build, as you'll have a lot more value from these two items. Picking Shurelya's or Moonstone depends on your comp. I think if you have a team that doesn't have a tank or doesn't have lots of ways to start a fight, Shurelya's is the build. If your team is more front to back, you have a tank or lots of bruisers and lots of CC, Moonstone is the way to go. You should take Flash, Heal, Exhaust, or Ignite, just depending on whatever you need. Finally for Glacial, you should always go the Redemption Moonstone build because it works best with Glacial scaling and Moonstone Heal amplifies your Resolve runes. You should always go Flash Heal since it gets amplified as well. Overall, I think the Janna rework was a good idea in theory, but the numbers are a little lacking. I think the changes were a big nerf for her overall as Janna's early game was buffed a bit, but her late game was nerfed hard. At the current state, if you play the aggressive style of Janna that Riot reworked her to be, it's very underwhelming, so the old Glacial build is still her best. Don't worry though, Riot Froxon, a member of the balance team, posted on November 13th that Janna was getting buffed for the next patch. His comment on Janna was that the changes last patch were directionally accurate, but she landed a little underpowered, which I completely agree. I have a feeling that Janna is going to be super broken as Riot always has a habit of over buffing rework champs if they flop after a rework, like this disgusting champion. I'm sure Aery or Comet will end up being the most optimal keystone, but I'll find that out next patch.